In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Eat the cat, eat the cat. They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Eat the cat, eat the cat.
Welcome back, Reformers. It is October 1st. You ready for October?
Yep.
It's funny that it's October 1st. And today we're going to talk about a popular pastor's moral failure, Christian nationalism, and everyone's favorite, we're going to react to some more reels. You ready to dive in?
There are infinite horrible reels to react to. So
Yeah. Have you watched them yet?
No.
Okay, good. We'll
I added one to it, but I haven't watched it.
Okay. We'll get a natural response here. And I haven't seen the one that he added, so that'll be fun. Before we talk about this pastor's moral failure, I want to say something that is our hope for the pastor. And it is that he would repent and that he would be restored as a brother in friendly fellowship with a congregation somewhere. He should never be back in ministry because of his failure. But we do want to see him restored. So he shouldn't be in ministry. By that, I mean he shouldn't be an elder. He shouldn't be restored to the pastorate because he has now disqualified himself. Do you have anything to say about that before we dive in? All right. I'm going to start by reading an article about the situation so everyone kind of knows what's going on here. This is a big deal in the Reformed world. This is a very popular Reformed pastor. So I'm going to dive in. Article reads, Stephen J. Lawson, a married pastor and father of 4, made news last week when he was fired from Trinity Bible Church of Dallas after informing its elders about an inappropriate relationship he'd had with an unnamed woman. That the prolific author of books on Calvinism and religious icons allegedly committed this sin has been a shock to his Reformed Baptist followers in North Texas and across the country. In the latest development, a California pastor this week accused Lawson of having a 5-year relationship with a younger woman. I believe she was in her 20s. That's what the word is. Per a story by the Roy's Report on Wednesday. He is 73. She is in her late 20s. Phil Johnson, an elder and pastor, that's the same thing.
Broken pole.
At John MacArthur's Grace Community in Sun Valley, where Lawson has delivered guest sermons, said in a now deleted post on X. What are you guys laughing at?
Oh, I said broken pole.
Why?
Because he's 73 and she's 20s.
She is not a member of his church, Johnson said, according to the Christian site Protestia. In fact, she lives in a different state, nowhere close to any of the ministries Steve served. I've got the article for that. We're going to put it in the comments. You can go ahead and check out the link there if you want to read more about that. Our camera guy's clapping because I remembered to say that.
Luca! Bueno? Piñu! Bueno? Piñu! Bueno? Piñu! Piñas! Lule Piñu! Piñu! Piñu!
So Phil Johnson, if anybody knows who he is, he's a pretty outspoken guy. He's going to call out things like this vehemently. Is that the right word?
Vehemently, yeah.
Nice. I'm learning English. I don't think you are, James. Anyways, so Phil Johnson called him out. Phil Johnson actually, he deleted the post. He wanted the elders to be able to deal with that. So that's what's going on. Anyways, do you have anything you want to say about the article before I move on?
I do.
Okay.
Vehemently.
It's a slight H.
Vehemently.
Vehemently.
We were all wrong. Is that what you said? James was right. Dang. Homeschooled.
Is that all you wanted to say about the article?
No. No, I mean, this is really interesting. So I've been spending a lot of time in conversations with people who are Catholic and on Catholic forums or Facebook groups lately. It's very interesting because their perspective of the vicar of Christ being the Pope, being he's the one who's continued on St. Peter's, Jesus giving him the keys to the kingdom and all that. Um, One of their biggest criticisms of the Protestant Reformed Church, which honestly a lot of their criticisms are lumped in with evangelical churches. They don't really discern between those two. But one of their biggest things is almost exactly this. It's the moral failings that occur, and they say that these things don't occur in the Catholic Church, basically, which they definitely do. And then, him being the vicar of Christ, they'll basically say, on one hand, he can speak at the same level of the Bible, but then he has to do it ex cathedra. Ex cathedra, he has to do it in a certain way from the right chair, and he has to be the right sayings, or it could be a council. And I just think it's relevant that a lot of Reformed people criticize the Catholic people because there's all these obvious issues in terms of like elders can't be married, in terms of indulgences, these things that have been pointed out throughout time, the veneration of Mary, and yet it's very, very easy to not be humbled by the fact that this can happen to someone who has spent their life leading congregations and leading people. And it happens in the evangelical, it happens in the Reformed world, it happens in the Catholic world, it happens in the Orthodox world. And I think the silver lining here is that we are all fallible. And that's, Reformed Theology 101, total depravity. Everyone is bent towards sin. Christ redeems them. He helps them to be sanctified throughout their life until the final atonement. And so it's just really sad to see the same thing happen that happens everywhere, but it's not really surprising. We had the same thing with Rabbi Zacharias semi-recently. And it's not even surprising anymore, but it is concerning to me how long this guy's relationship was and the fact that it was like a total secret. I mean, I'm glad he came forward, but
I think he
who's to
only did
say?
after her father threatened.
Yeah, I
her
was going to say this sounds to me like someone basically outed him instead of him actually having the conviction to oust himself, which is I think the worst part of it all. Everyone deals with sin. It's just a difference of, does your conviction lead you to repentance, and does it lead you to taking action to the appropriate action, whether that's if you're an elder being removed from your eldership. And for him, I mean, it's probably his entire livelihood, but he didn't have that. And that's as someone who ventures towards a critical spirit, unfortunately, my biggest qualms with people are the people who live in patterns of sin, because to me, that is not a regenerate spirit. Not that I can determine that, but it doesn't show the fruit of one, to say you can sin and sin and sin and sin and have no accountability or conviction and be okay being in a leadership position. There's red flags all down the path of long-term, whether it's addictive, quote unquote, behavior or just patterns of sin that make you seriously question a person's salvation, and to discern that and say, well, you definitely shouldn't be leading people. That's obvious, which I'm glad has come out into the light. But it's a good reminder for Christians everywhere. You are not incapable of falling into the very same mire, and Paul was very clear about that in his writings.
Yeah, God uses these things in wonderful ways. And one of the ways I think he's used this is to show us, to humble us as a collective church. I remember, and I didn't even listen to Mark Driscoll before The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill came out, but listening to the podcast, I started crying in my vehicle thinking how easily this could be me, because his was an abuse of power in his church, wanted to have a lot of attention put on him, not have accountability among elders. And so, we learn that Mark Driscoll, we learn that Ravi Zacharias, we learn that Stephen Lawson are not Christ, that there was one perfect man, and that we are to humble ourselves before him and be led by God's Holy Spirit into sanctification for his glory. At first I'll say, I was hoping this was going to be like Matt Chandler. Like we were going to hear something come out that maybe there was a text message or something like that it wasn't full blown and maybe was headed that way, but wasn't there. And the elders caught it. They got ahead of it. They removed him from the pastorate with the hopes of restoration. But it really sucked to hear this was a 5-year thing with a 20-year-old woman.
Well, he's so old that it's obviously like I don't know. This just screams like daddy issues. This sounds horrible, but I don't know. When you're 73 and you're seen as a high authority, like
You stand on a stage in front of thousands of people every
yeah,
week.
like you're seen as a moral authority, so the things that you do can be easily seen as more okay. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a young Christian girl who looked up to him, or somebody totally outside the church who just living a double life. I don't know. It's just sad.
What do you think could have been done to prevent something like this? Measures put in place for elders at churches.
I feel like a proclivity like this should be able to be dredged up in the process of determining if someone should be an elder. Um, and with the recent stories like Matt Chandler and it being over Instagram and this guy, it, with them living in a totally different state, obviously like digital media plays a major role in these relationships, at least those two. And I think being open to transparency of your digital communications, which sounds hyper controlling, but not necessarily that it would have to be used, but that you're open to that being examined. I don't know. I don't know that much about him particularly. I don't know if you've been read any of his books.
He's so I'll give a little bit of a biography. I don't know, credentials. He's a teaching fellow at Westminster. He is a professor at the Master's Seminary, which is where Phil Johnson, that's Grace, that's John MacArthur. He has his own, he leads, it's called the Center for Expository Preaching, I think is their organization. So he's an authority in expository preaching. And there are a few other committees and whatnot that he's on. So as we close out this topic, I want to read a article on what Dr. Al Mohler said. Dr. Al Mohler is the president of Southern Seminary. He's traveled around with Stephen Lawson for a long time. And speaking of how to get ahead of this, because we know that no man is perfect. Men fail. So we set up guards around that. That's why we have a plurality of elders in Reformed churches that hold each other accountable. Al Mohler speaks to that. So the article says, Mohler, 64, shared his advice Tuesday following a chapel service at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, where he serves as president. While Mohler declined to refer to Lawson by name, he called him a dear friend who is a well-known preacher, and admittedly, he did not see this coming. This is what he said. I want to share that I did not see this coming, and for the sake of history and anyone who may hear this, I don't want to send them Googling for a name, but I also don't want to turn it off. So I won't use a name, said Mohler. I'll simply say this preacher is a well-known man, a man who preached right here from this platform, and a dear friend with whom I've preached all over the country and many parts of the world. I didn't see this coming. Mohler said while he couldn't have predicted his failure, there were some signs in retrospect, including the amount of time Lawson spent traveling alone. When a catastrophe like this falls upon us, you can look backward and connect some dots, but they didn't appear until you look back, he said. One of those patterns is just an awful lot of time traveling alone and the exposure of being all over the world alone. I just want to speak from the heart and say this kind of catastrophe, the fall of this house, is very great. So he alludes to the Billy Graham rule. The link for that, again, will be in the description. He alludes to the Billy Graham rule here. Billy Graham would never travel anywhere without another man with him. He would never be in a room alone with a woman, ever. That was his solid rule. And he actually says that eventually. I watched the video. Al Mohler gets to saying, I've never said this from this platform before, but if you are never alone with a woman and you have accountability with you at all times, you will never have sex with a woman other than your wife. And so he gives that advice. I think we all need to be accountable to one another and to heed that advice, even if you're not obviously a pastor. Don't be alone with women. So next topic, Christian nationalism. That's been making headlines recently, Christian nationalism. When you hear that term, what comes to mind?
January 6th.
The insurrection?
Yeah.
Why?
That's just a term that was used. It was a term that's vilified, and well, it was a term that was used to apply to a group of people that did a thing. and that's not attaching a positive or negative imperative to that thing or that group of people, but that was just a branding effort.
Yeah, media. Heard it a lot, media. We're actually going to, that's his birthday. We're going to go through a video here that actually talks about January 6th and associates it with Christian nationalism. I pulled up a liberal media site and a Christian one so we could get both points of view when it comes to Christian nationalism. I also asked ChatGPT to define it. So here we go. Let's see how close ChatGPT's definition is to Matt's. See if they bring up January 6th. Christian nationalism is a socio-political ideology that seeks to merge Christian identity, beliefs, and symbols with national identity, often advocating that the laws, culture, and public policies of a country should reflect Christian values. It typically emphasizes the idea that the nation was founded on Christian principles and should be governed according to those principles. I think that's a pretty good definition. I was expecting some reason, this is media too, I guess, for ChatGPT to be biased and to tell me January 6th, racist white people who think they like Jesus, but they think Jesus is white. But that's not what we got.
No context. Just that clip.
A follow-up question to that would be, was America founded as a Christian nation?
So I don't have a lot of historical context for this question. I have heard snippets here and there, mostly on Reels and a few books I've read. I know, for example, I saw a Charlie Kirk reel where he's like, here's the theology of all the founders. These are the people who signed the Declaration of Independence. These are the people who signed the Constitution. This is who they were. This is what they believed. And it was a very compelling argument. If any of that's true, I have no idea. But I do think that America was founded with a lot of the same, with a lot of the same principles and ideals that just came out of Europe. Like they were fighting back against some things, like tyrannical government, but in a lot they adopted a lot of the governmental roles from the European government, which I do believe was founded on more Catholic. I'm speaking about things I don't know a lot about at this point, on more Catholic ideals. But was it founded as a Christian nation? I mean, when you have things like indivisible under God, there's certain elements that you say yes. And does that mean that there should not be separation of church and state? No. And I think those things are often conflated as, well, if you believe it was founded as a Christian nation, you believe that Christians should be given preference over everyone else in the country, and that's not what that means. And I mean, if you go to Christ and his preference was, I'm going to die so that people can experience eternal life. So that's not the Christian principle, but it is conflated often that Christians think that America should serve their religion because we are founded as a Christian nation. But I think if I could speak for at least a subset of Christians, I would say most Christians more so think that it just means we should basically punish the things that God declares as evil and show favor towards the things God declares as good.
That's what you would define Christian nationalism? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that the perception of where we found it as a Christian nation is often we should vilify the people who aren't Christians, but that's not what it means. We still esteem good, whether that's done by a Christian or a secular person. We still uphold freedoms, whether that's for the Muslim or the Christian. We're not showing preference towards Christians above other people, but we are showing a preference towards the moral law laid out in Scripture above any other moral law.
Yeah, so a comparison could be we don't, like radical Muslims, like we don't believe what they would about death to the Christian, death to anyone who's not in submission to Allah. That's radical. Now, I'm not saying
their government will actually cut off the heads of Christians, and so but that's something that is governmentally condoned by Sharia law. So the more extreme versions, which is the Taliban, or that group of aggressive belief is actually operating in their government. But you would see the same thing in any religion, in any secular group that's like, hey, we should put to death the people that we think should be put to death. And we see that if you go back to abortion. I had
I
a
was just
long
about to say
comment
it,
thread.
unborn babies.
Yeah, I had a long comment thread with a secular guy who just kept going and going and going, and eventually I got him to say, "Okay, it's human DNA, and you're killing it." And they have to eventually say, "I'm okay with that." And so, the Christian standard is, we're not saying keep the Christian babies and throw out the ones who aren't Christian parents. We're saying save the human lives, because that's God's moral law. And so that's where we're getting away from Christian nationalism. I'm still talking about founded as a Christian nation, but that's really what it means, is that we're abiding by God's moral law as a nation.
And I think that's what Christian nationalism is. I think it's cultivating the world to glorify God. And we do that in the way we live, in what we do with the work of our hands. And that's some people in government, that's some people in marketing, that's some people in hospitals. But all that we do, we want to glorify God. And so that's what we're cultivating with the work of our hands. What was I going to say?
I think another thing worth mentioning here for me personally is that I've never really liked isms. And we talked about this in terms of Calvinism and the things that are bucketed in with that term, whether it's connotations or historical facts, like he was anti-Semitic. I don't like isms because it associates you with a group of things that you don't necessarily fully understand the scope of what you're associating yourself with. So in terms of nationalism, it has many connotations as intended by media for bad, with bad intent. But in terms of just nationalism in general, I just don't like the term, because I'm not a nationalist. Like America will come and go, and the kingdom of God will carry on.
Mm-hmm. I took a class on this. The question, it was a class based on the question, is America a Christian nation? And I think that's a different question than, and I'm getting a little dogmatic about terms, but that's a different question than was it founded on American principles? Because I don't believe America is a Christian nation. I don't believe it ever was a Christian nation. I believe there's one Christian nation that exists in all the nations, and that's the true church. But I do believe that America was founded on Christian principles, and I do believe that we should stand for godly principles in America, because we're cultivating the world to glorify Christ as Christians. That's what we're called to do. I'm going to show a news clip, and we're going to talk through that talks about Christian nationalism, so we can see the difference in how different media portrays it. Here's the first one. This is from PBS NewsHour. Clip will be in
The phrase white Christian nationalism has been in the headlines quite a bit recently, but what does it really mean? Laura Barón Lopez recently spoke to one expert to better understand the concept and its reach in American society.
Brad Onishi is a former evangelical minister who once identified as a Christian nationalist himself. He left the church in 2005 and began studying religion from the outside, including extremism. He now hosts the popular podcast Straight White American Jesus.
So right away.
That's a great name for a podcast.
Straight White American
That immediately
Jesus.
makes you want to go listen to it.
And is the author of Preparing for War, the extremist history of white Christian nationalism and what comes next. I began by asking him what that
was a good book cover. I enjoy a good book cover.
Asking him what that term actually means.
Christian nationalism is an ideology that is based around the idea that this is a Christian nation, that this was founded as a Christian nation, and therefore it should be a Christian nation today and should be so in the future. According to survey data, Christian nationalists agree with statements like the federal government should declare the United States of America a Christian nation. Our laws should be based on Christian values. Being a Christian is important if you want to be a real American.
Onishi tracks a number of subgroups and ideas.
Two of those fall into one bucket and one falls into the other, I guess. So the values we see in Christianity are values that have been upheld throughout many, many governments and many, many religions. You even see Wicca is do no harm. Like that's their one golden thing that unites all these huge subsets of witchcraft belief. But their whole thing is like self-pleasure and do no harm. So it's it's just very interesting. It's like this isn't unique to Christianity, most of the principles that Christians want to put forth. But it's been unique to every government, as in most governments have not executed it to perfection, but they agree on some common things. We agree, most religions agree on some common ethics. Don't murder, don't steal, don't bribe, don't ruin relationships with your neighbors, like take care of the people around you. These aren't crazy beliefs. And then the other two questions, the one saying like the federal government should declare this as a Christian nation. I don't know. You could argue one nation under God, like that they already had done that maybe at one point, but is it actually living as one? Absolutely not. So those questions kind of fall into different buckets. And he didn't define Christian nation either.
To be a good American, do you need to be a Christian?
No.
That's the third thing he said was the Christian.
Not at all. And that's where the nationalists, I mean, there's a great example of this. One of my pastors has a neighbor, and that neighbor always cleans up the leaves that even float from his trees to other people's properties. And he's a sweet guy, cares about the people around him, and he's very outspoken that he does not like Christianity, but he does all the things that a Christian who's following basic Christian principles would do. So no, you don't need to be a Christian to be a good American.
White Christian nationalism, including what's known as the New Apostolic Reformation.
Well, the New Apostolic Reformation is notable for a number of reasons. One, it's built around the idea that Christians are called to a new transformation or reformation of the United States. These are Christians who want to revolutionize the way that our country looks and to make it great again in terms of being a Christian nation.
Totally threw that Trump flag out there. He said, and to make it great again, to make it a Christian nation.
Also are deeply invested in the notion of spiritual warfare, the idea that we are called as Christians to fight a cosmic battle between good and evil, and that it's our duty to be boots on the ground for God in that conflict. What this has led to some decades later is the New Apostolic Reformation leaders, the apostles and the prophets that are really at the head of this movement, were some of the earliest to...
I'm going to riff on, I listen to a lot of the Joe Rogan podcast, and I love the weird people he has on, the super weird ones. And there are streams of different growing beliefs that A, we're in a simulation, B, that basically we were monkeys transformed by aliens who are helping us accelerate, C, we're accelerating at our own rate, but aliens intervene in us destroying each other with nukes.
Doesn't Elon Musk believe we're in a simulation?
He says it's very likely in one podcast. I don't know what he actually believes. But all that to say, all of these are still religious beliefs. You're just trying to make it sound science fiction-y. And so, like, and they all, and come with these conversations come, well, there's things that we can't see. Are UFOs from this other dimension? Like, it's all just new branding to put on the same old ideas. Spiritual warfare, dimensions we can't see. Are they bending space and time? Like, I'm not a theoretical physicist, and I couldn't tell you exactly what that means or how they suggest that this is done. And there's people way smarter than me. But in reality, people who choose to follow those pathways of discerning what's going on, however they can, they're new religious subsets. That's all they are. And it's not to say that religion, science are the exact same thing, but I believe science serves religion, and it disserves religions that come out to be not true. So in this vein where you have this intellectual society and everything coming forward with all these other ideas, we still believe in cosmic battles. You just call them aliens or other dimensions instead of spirits and principalities.
And I would say one of the key factors in why there are so many different views on this, as far as whether it's aliens, whether it's whatever, are because you said societies, which I think that's what it used to be. I think we used to function as societies. Now we're in a super individualistic culture. And so whatever somebody wants to interpret it as, they do. And they try to make it sound smart, even though a lot of the time it sounds really dumb.
Do you think aliens are real?
No. Unless you consider like angels and demons aliens.
What do you think, James?
James!
James gave us the finger, the pointer finger, not the middle one. All right, moving on.
We're almost to the January 6th point in this clip. I just want to get to that, and then we'll go to the next one.
Ahead of this movement were some of the earliest to support Donald Trump in 2016, and they've remained steadfast in that support. They were at the very avant-garde of trying to get the 2020 election overturned in the wake of Joe Biden's victory and mobilizing folks to be at January 6th. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of New Apostolic Reformation Christians at January 6th, as an example.
We know that 2/3 of white evangelicals sympathize or
Time I hear facts, my brain immediately goes, how does he know that? How does he know they identify with that? Were they busing people in? Because that would be a good way to know. Like, hey, this is the bus from the NAR. But does he really know that?
sympathize or adhere to white Christian nationalist beliefs. So where do they fall within this larger movement?
I think white evangelicals are the group we think of when we think of white Christian nationalism, and for good reason. These are folks who, when we think about the Iowa...
White. Why is that all we hear? We saw a clip recently where Cliff is on a podcast. Everybody knows Cliff Knaddle, that guy. And he says that the majority, you pulling it up, the majority of Christians in the world are black women. If you actually look at the percentage of Christians in the world, the highest percentage is black women. And then he alludes to the highest percentage of atheists are white males. And so all you ever hear, it's definitely an agenda, is white male, white male, white male, white male. The religion, if Cliff is right, is a black female religion. It's dominated by black females. And then the religion of atheism is dominated by white males. So finding that number here.
So this isn't across the whole U.S. This is of that ethnicity, how many are Christian and how many are non-Christians. So white people are 70% Christian and 30% non-Christian. This is Pew Research Center. I'll put in the show notes from 2024, actually. Black people are 79% Christian and 21% non-Christian. So more Christian Black people. Asians are 34% Christian, 66 not. Latino are 77% Christian, 23% not. And other mix is 64-36.
Well, we're white.
70-30. So we are third in terms of the statistic of Christian, non-Christian across our specific race after Black and Latino.
Stop your saying white male.
Caucuses. In 2016, Trump's white evangelical voters were about 20% of his share of voters in that cycle. Just a few weeks ago in 2024, that grew to well over 50%. White evangelicals remain committed to the MAGA movement, and one of the key indicators of why is Christian nationalism.
Are there leaders?
Key indicators or reasons is baby murder, but we'll move on. We'll go to the next clip. So that one was, again, PBS, liberal source. Now we're going to look at CBN News. I'm going to go through 1 minute and 30 seconds to 4:30.
The label Christian.
1 minute, 30 seconds. All right. Here goes CBN on Christian nationalism.
Roughly 3 in 10 Americans qualify as Christian nationalist adherents or sympathizers. But in that specific survey, the criteria cites someone as a Christian nationalist if they believe the following: that the government should declare America a Christian nation, laws should be based on Christian values, that we will not have a country anymore if America moves away from our Christian foundations, being Christian is an important part of being truly American, and that God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas of American society. Well, that grouping could potentially include millions of...
So it was pretty much the same as what they said, the other news source. The other source did say they really lumped it in with MAGA. They lumped it in with January 6th, when this is saying that the government should declare America a Christian nation. Laws should be based on Christian values. We're not going to have a country anymore if we don't have...
Do you think any of these are valid? Trying to pull up. There's the first 3. The government should declare America a Christian nation. Valid, not valid?
I think that if we keep in mind that our goal as a Christian, and you can feel free to disagree with this, but our goal as being Christian is to cultivate a world that glorifies Christ, does America being deemed a Christian nation glorify Christ more or less? There's an argument that could be made either way. So medieval Roman Catholicism, that was Christian, less, because a lot of what they were doing wasn't biblical. But if America's a Christian nation and we're actually following Christian principles, and our leaders and our lawmakers, they're all being obedient to the scriptures, I think that's the end goal of everything, of the world, when Christ comes back and makes a new heaven and a new earth. All of his enemies are his footstool. That's the goal. So if it's done that way and it's done by the Holy Spirit, yes, but when it's done by man, we tend to distort.
I think that would be more of a theocracy, and I don't think that we should, because we're not. I didn't see that.
He has a cliff clip.
Oh, you just ruined me writing down.
Law should be based on Christian values. Yes or no?
Yes.
I would say biblical, but I think we can translate that to that. Not MAGA values, but Christian values. Yeah. We will not have a country anymore if America moves away from Christian foundations.
That's such a nuanced statement. I mean, even know what
plenty
they're
of
saying.
countries exist that are not Christian foundations.
Are they trying to say like it'll be a ruined country?
It's like the end times, like everything's going to fall apart if it's not Christian. Yeah.
Which
being
just think of the ones that aren't. Canada.
Oh.
Kind of sucks. Canada.
I don't actually know anything about Canada. I know the people that come from Canada are big fans of it.
India sucks.
I don't know. Does all of India suck, Corey? These are pretty strong statements.
All of India sucks. Thanks. No.
All right. Being Christian. you will revise those at all?
India sucks.
All right. Being Christian is an important part of being truly American.
Being Christian is an important part of being truly American. Is an important part? It's not integral, but important.
This all hinges on what you call truly American.
Yeah, I know.
Which is going to hinge on, are you a Christian or not? It's a circular.
It's super nuanced.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the connotations are.
Like, if you believe truly American means democracy, then you're going to say you should give everyone equal everything, like pure democracy. If you're going to say it means republic, then you're going to basically say the opposite. And so it becomes, what do you believe is truly American, and why do you believe that? And that gets very, very complicated.
Yeah, I don't even want to answer that because
God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas of American society. That's an interesting one.
I think God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas, period. The garden. Mm-hmm. That was the original call, was to cultivate the land, have dominion over it. So I don't want to.
Do you think that applies to governments, or do you think that, do you think that was Christians or all humans? And do you think those two things are the same at this time period? That's A. We'll start there.
Well, I'm going back to what does perfect look like. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm saying, is that perfect looks like there's no sin and Christians are leading sinlessly. But now there is sin. And we're working back towards that. The Holy Spirit is. We aren't, through us. So if the Holy Spirit's working back towards that, and now you're getting into different eschatological views, but which we're going to talk about postmillennialism next week. I don't know where I stand as far as which camp eschatologically, but there are texts that scholars who keep the Bible within context have studied deeply and would say that, yes, even the government. Me, I don't know. I'm still wrestling through it, because they would use texts like, he will, I don't want to mess it up. He will make all of his enemies his footstool, basically. And in that text, I think contextually, it talks about how Christ will be seated at the right hand of the Father, and he will be there until he makes all of his enemies his footstool. Now, where is Christ right now? He's at the right hand of the Father. That's where he ascended to. So the postmillennialist would say he's going to be there and things are going to get better. This will be a Christian world until all of his enemies are his footstool. And then they would go to the Gospels, where it talks about the kingdom being like unleavened bread, or like a mustard seed, and it slowly expands and becomes more and more Christian. So there's an argument for it. That's all I would say.
No more on this one.
No, I think we're good there. So yeah, next week we'll talk a little bit more about postmillennialism. I'm not an expert on it. I'm reading one book on that topic. I think that when it comes to taking an eschatological view, you really need to know how it works within your theological framework. So it's probably going to be like 10 to 15 years before I take an actual view on that, because I need to go all the way back and figure out how it works with the rest of the theological beliefs that I have. Okay. Next, we are going to react to some videos. Is this the one you put in here? No, this is just cool.
Yeah, next week, and also I'll break down what the major views are, and I'll just read off of a really reliable document that I'll share in the show notes next week. But we'll literally break down what all of them are, because pastors hate to talk about Revelation. Statistic survey says. So maybe you can get a good general perspective of what all the perspectives are. And then maybe you can take it to your pastor, and that would be a good edifying experience for you.
This is just want to get your reaction.
I can't believe I've been driving around like this for so long, just flapping around. Could have been like this.
That's freaking cool.
How did he open it?
I don't know, but that was really cool. Looks like...
Oh, with his leg. He bumped it with his right leg.
Okay. So you're just getting pulled over by the cops, and you got to reach for your wallet, and you bump that thing, and the gun goes...
Yeah, it seems a little...
You.
Seems a little dangerous.
He's James Bond. He pulled up a gun out of nowhere. All right, this is the second one's Abolitionist Rising. This is a group of people. They're reformed in their theology, and there's a difference between the pro-life movement, the abolition movement, and smash mouth syncretism. Abolition just means their emphasis is justice. And when it comes to abortion, they won't sign any bill that is partial at all, even if it's working towards no abortion. So they won't sign a bill that says heartbeat bill. They're not going to sign a heartbeat bill. They're going to say, no, that's unacceptable. It needs to be no abortion. The smash mouth incrementalist is going to sign a heartbeat bill, but they're also going to have a letter next to it saying, this isn't the goal. The goal is no abortion at all. And then...
What does that mean?
Smash mouth incrementalist.
I've never even heard that.
So basically, it's a post-mill term. Doug Wilson, like he's a smash mouth incrementalist. It just means we're working towards eradicating abortion incrementally, and so you don't
smash mouth.
Like, I'm gonna put it in your face. Like, this is
just being aggressive.
Yeah, aggressive. This is our position. So they disagree, abolitionists and smash mouth incrementalists. The abolitionist says, I'm going to stand before God, and if he says you signed an unequal bill and you didn't stand for the complete eradication of all abortion, God's going to be upset with you. Smash mouth incrementalist says, no, I still stood for it. I did sign a bill that I didn't necessarily wholeheartedly believe in, but next to it I wrote, this isn't the goal. It just means less death, and I'm happy with that. So one focus is less death, one focus is justice. And then the pro-life movement is just all over the place. So this is Abolitionist Rising.
We're looking for conversations with open-minded people who actually can express their views.
What minors are having abortions? It's already legal.
Yeah, my friend recently got an abortion herself because the baby father cheated on her. So I will say it's cruel. I will admit that it's very, very cruel.
Oh, minors do have abortions.
It's already illegal.
You go and talk to a counselor. Counselor says, here's how you order a pill. Go get the pill, take the pill. You don't think anyone's having abortions here?
Okay, but this makes them feel bad about it. Exactly. And that's not good. That
You don't think people should feel bad when they do bad things?
I do like how the clip ended, because he's just using common sense. You don't think people should feel bad when they do bad things? Now, we live in a society that has brainwashed people to believe that this isn't a bad thing. So there's more accountability there than just a woman.
It's just like getting your teeth cleaned now. It's like
Yeah.
preventative healthcare.
Yeah. I thought you were going to reveal something about how immoral getting your teeth cleaned is for a minute. I was like, what the frick are you talking
No strong opinions there. Fluoride, though. Question mark.
But yeah, so he just brings it back to common sense. He's like, you don't think people should be punished for doing bad things? Bad people doing bad things. They shouldn't feel bad about that. Bringing it back to that.
I had a conversation on one of our Facebook pages where a clip came out about abortion, and this is a guy I've known a long time, and I really respect his level of critical thinking and logic about basically everything I've ever interacted with him over. And his thing was, he didn't necessarily say we should or shouldn't or anything like that, but he said every government that is legislating this needs to keep in mind this has been a continuous, this does and has occurred in every single American society ever. And so if you are
American or every
society, I say American,
Yeah.
in every society ever, in throughout history. And so he said that needs to be taken into consideration when legislating for it. And I think to that effect, he was saying maybe, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the connotation I got from it was maybe we should have some circumstances in which it's accessible and safer for the autonomy of the woman, so she doesn't have, more dangerous abortions. And my response to that basically was, there's been things that have occurred as a product of depravity in every society throughout all of history, like murder and pedophilia and rape and theft. And we have basically across every society in all of history denounced and punished those things because they should be, because that's the role, in my opinion, the role of government is to uphold justice. And so this is a thing where we've moved the line to say, well, now it's in a gray area, or it's not a gray area at all. It's actually totally acceptable. And so we shouldn't punish it. But that does not change. That is the ending of a human life with human DNA. And so I think in his mind, maybe it was, there should be maybe safe, accessible routes to it. And in my mind, it was, we should continue to try to both decrease as well as abolish it, just as every society in the past should have. And I also believe that men should be punished way more than women need to be legislated for, because one man can impregnate, full tilt, like 2,000 girls in a year. It just depends on his output level. But
we got a comment on one of our reels as well where someone said, James shaking his head got me. Where someone said, so you believe that women who are bleeding in parking lots should just be left to bleed out or go home and die? And I just said no. And the reason I just said no is because obviously you're trying to use a fallacy to pigeonhole me into a position that I don't take. No, you provide medical care to those people and you do everything you can to save both lives.
Legislation, and I'm probably going to say this every episode of this thing ever that we mentioned abortion, legislation should be made at the 99% of occurrences that actually happen, and that is not in that 99%. It's just not. Most abortions are two consenting adults decide to have sex, which is the moment where you can choose the risk or not having the risk of having a baby. And then down the road, that whether it's economic, whether it's family pressure, whether it's he cheated on her and she wants to take it out on him, so she's going to murder her baby. It just doesn't matter. All the nuances are distractions in this conversation, because you have to say, I'm okay with murdering humans. And at that point, in my opinion, you're so deluded, you shouldn't be able to help make legislation about it anyway.
And if the doctor's saying both of them are going to die, this is the one thing I can do to save both of them, that's not an abortion. It's a total difference between that and someone going to opt.
And as someone who worked in healthcare for 7 or 8 years, I was in emergency rooms most of the time, but you literally cannot refuse care. It doesn't matter if they don't have insurance, don't have money. You cannot let someone die in the parking lot. You have to give them care. And again, it's just not a normal circumstance. But in a situation where it's like mom or the baby, which is incredibly rare, that's something that parents and doctors can decide. But there are plenty of circumstances, the massive majority of circumstances, where that's not even a relevant conversation, and therefore it shouldn't have legislation. You should just deal with it in the moment. The doctors, the parents, all of it should be dealt with in the moment.
That's not what we're talking. That situation that he's saying is not what we're talking about. So let's not always pretend like that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the person who wanted to do it. So
it's those what ifs are so compelling. Like, that's why they take that even in this conversation right now. It's like people use these what ifs, and so it's like you have to address the what ifs because you're trying to respond to them and have an edifying conversation. But the reality is, all the what ifs are less than 1% of abortions.
And if you have a hard time answering those questions, it's really smart to answer a question with a question. So if someone asks me, well, what if someone's bleeding out in the parking lot? This legislation would make it to where they bleed completely out. They die. Both the people die. My question back is that the only time you think abortion should be accessible? No, it never is. They always want abortion to be accessible. It's not just for that. So that's not the conversation. So answer questions with questions.
Do we already watch this one?
No. This is yours.
So, Don, you love censorship, is what you're saying?
No, I don't love censorship. I believe in moderation.
Moderation is a propaganda word for censorship. Look, if something's illegal, we're going to take it down. If it's not illegal, then we're putting our thumb on the scale and we're being censors.
You're putting your thumb on the scale for moderating hate speech. I mean, you don't put out child pornography. That's not...
It's illegal.
Some people would say that's considered censorship. I'm just saying.
I literally said, if something is legal, okay, we will obviously remove it.
Okay.
We, I guess, have a disagreement because I do not believe in censorship that goes beyond the law, and you do.
So you don't consider that hate speech?
I guess you're not understanding what I'm saying.
We don't agree on this.
Yes, you want censorship and I don't.
No, I don't want censorship at all.
Yes, you do.
No, I want responsibility.
You desperately want censorship.
No, if I want a censorship...
You want censorship so bad you can taste it.
No, that's not true.
And I'm against censorship. I'm in favor of freedom of speech. And freedom of speech only is relevant when people you don't like say things you don't like. Otherwise, it has no meaning.
I just love how he's like...
You want it so bad you can taste it.
You want it so bad you can taste it. He articulated it so well. He's just like, we're like, what about child pornography? He's like, I just said if it's illegal, we take it down.
And that's... And I if I could... take a gander at his subtext there. Legislation is a process in which things are deemed right or wrong, and that process in our country is hopefully done justly, not always, but hopefully done justly, and therefore it's not up to the entity that is receiving monetization to determine that, because then you have a bias because they're going to do what makes them the most money. It's up to the legislative body, which in our country still makes them a lot of money. So maybe that's a void point. But ideally, the legislation, the groups of people making them are upholding justice. And so he's saying it's not my job to be jury, judge, and executioner, or whatever that saying is.
Just like the other social media platforms.
Yeah, we'll follow the laws.
Yeah, a lot of the social media platforms just take down what they disagree with. So there's just like the media. So there's a single narrative that is pushed, and you never even hear the other side because it's hate speech. When he's saying it's not hate speech unless it's against the law. You just don't like opinions.
Sorry,
you're good.
All right, last clip of the day. I threw this one in there in Corey last night or this morning. I don't even know. This is we cranked on Trump pretty hard based on our commenters. I felt like we were pretty even. We make fun of making fun of okay, I'll go here. We had a lot of commenters who were like, how dare you make fun of Trump? You don't have enough respect. Someone I'm very close to sent me a video of kind of a collection of, and we can put that in the show notes, maybe watch it next week, but a collection of moments in which Trump is basically associating himself with the church. He's talking about Jesus Christ, and yet he always avoids saying, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. He is my savior. He never says any of that. And they sent me a Bible verse. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but there is a role in society to mock that which is worth mocking. And I'm trying to think if there's a biblical precedent for that. I don't know off the top of my head, but humor and laughter are things that minimize that which should be minimized in my head. And so when we are laughing at ridiculous things, it's because those things are silly and we should laugh at silly things. And you have to laugh sometimes. We talk about serious topics all the time. Like,
yeah,
you have to laugh sometimes.
That doesn't mean we hate the guy. Like,
no, I feel bad for Biden.
And I told you guys,
Trump, I'm like,
I told you guys, I'm voting for him. Like, I'm picking on him. Yeah, he says some dumb stuff, but I'm voting for him. Like, don't think that. And so one of the things I was going to say, Bible verse, the Proverbs constantly say, don't have unequal measures. So when Trump says something that's unbiblical and ungodly, we're going to call it out, just like when Biden says something that's unbiblical or ungodly. I'm not going to put this guy on a pedestal and say everything he does is perfect. Everything we do is not perfect. You guys call us out on it in our comments. So when we call Trump out on something that he is not standing for because it is unbiblical, I saw people talking about abortion should be a state right, the national abortion ban, yada, yada, yada. When Trump does not stand for something that is godly and moral, we will call him out. When Biden doesn't stand for something that is godly and moral, we will call him out. It doesn't matter who it is. Everybody deserves to be called out for that, especially if they're trying to be or are a national leader. They need to be called out more than anybody else. People who are in charge of making laws or in charge of passing laws, vetoing laws. This is the sword that God has given to the government to use appropriately. And we live in a country where we have a say. And if you are a Christian, you shouldn't be afraid to never call out the person you voted for just because it might make you look bad or whatever. You stand on God's side. You don't stand on either.
This goes back to Christian nationalism. Like, you're not a nationalist, you're a Christian. And if that is hard for you, maybe you should re-examine your Christianity. If you don't ever attend a congregation with other believers, maybe you should re-examine your Christianity. If you don't spend any time in fellowship, whether it's at a church or not, you should re-examine it. If you don't have fruits of the Spirit, if you're not being less angry over time, if you are not being less perturbed by the things of this world, if you're not finding more and more peace, if you're experiencing more anxiety and depression, examine it, because you might be feeding off the wrong source. And if your source for your peace of mind is a specific political person, this podcast will always piss you off. But yeah, I'm not going to go there.
Joshua, one sec. Joshua chapter 5, verses 13 and 14. Joshua chapter 5, verses 13 and 14. When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua approached him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied. "I have now come as commander of the Lord's army." We are on neither side. We're for the Lord's army. Can't remember which president it was. It was either Lincoln or Washington. Someone asked him, "I'm praying that God is on our side with this." And the president said, "I'm praying that we're on God's side." That's what you should be praying.
All right, a little laughter for the end of the day.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Eat the cat. Eat the cat. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Eat the cat. Eat the cat. They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. Eat the cat. Eat the cat. Eat the cat. Eat the cat.
That's awesome.
One thing I like about Trump, same suit every time you see him, same McDonald's cheeseburger, billionaire. Like it, consistency, and then same dance.
You don't like Biden's ice cream?
Well, it fell off on the ground. Then he fell off a bike.
We need to oh my gosh.
These are our leaders.
This is the guy who China and Russia are all looking at us and they're like, their guy doesn't even know who their vice president is or can't say his name right. Either way. It's
all right, reformers. We're out.
We're tired. We're out.